Testing, testing. Good morning. Good. Everybody have a good time last night? All right. Good party. Well, I'm here to do morning announcements, and I really don't have any, other than good morning. So, actually, a few things. The exhibit hall's open till 4:45 today. Lunch will be served there again. We did find a lost thing yesterday. If anybody's missing anything and they want to describe it to us, we might be able to give it back to you. What's that? Your foot? Clicker. Okay. You also all have audience response systems. When you're done with them, please return them. If you're using a translation headset, please return it. So with that, testing. There we go. We have a very special treat this morning, the very first International Symposium morning show hosted by Kendra. As we said, she is hoping to be discovered today. So let's all support her in that endeavor. After all, someone keeps muting me. This is, it's Simon. He keeps hitting the mute button on his audience response system. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome, all the way from Denver, Colorado, but appearing live for you here in Nashville, Tennessee, your mistress of ceremonies, the vivacious Kendra Betz.
Great. All right.
With
Thank
her
you, Paul.
three very special guests.
Yep.
Michael Boninger, Stephen Sprigle, and Sharon Sutherland.
All right. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for coming, everybody, and participating in this experiment of our first ISS morning show. As Mark said, I signed up for this because I am hoping to get discovered. This is my one shot. But they also said, Kendra, you can do something fun and innovative, whatever you want to do, but you get the 8 o'clock shot after the big gathering the night before. So whatever you want to do, good luck with that. Did you guys have a good time last night? Great time? All right. How many of you are still wearing your wristbands? Okay, I brought scissors for you because you don't have them in your hotel rooms. If you want to wear them for a couple of days just for the memories, that's okay too. So it was a great gathering. Again, thanks to the ISS team for putting that on and all of the manufacturers who helped participate in that. It was fantastic. We can't do this event without, of course, the presenters, but the exhibitors. All of our exhibitors are extremely important. We want to make sure that you spend time in the exhibit hall today before we close down this evening. We want to direct, we've got a whole hallway of sports and recreation equipment over by the climbing wall, and they would love to see all of you today. It's been a great turnout. If you haven't been over there, please take some time to head that way and see how you can apply your wheeled mobility and seating skills to adaptive sports and recreation. So they've traveled a long way to share that with you. Okay, without further ado, we will go ahead and introduce our first guest speaker. Dr. Michael Boninger. Hey. Thanks for coming, Mike. Great to see you. You look great.
Great to see you too.
How's the kids?
Good.
Good,
How's
good.
Maddie? Any texts this morning?
No text this morning. It's all going well. Good. Have a seat. You got coffee ready to go? Got mine too. So many of you met Dr. Boninger. You know, we have to practice sitting. Many of you met Dr. Boninger yesterday. Fabulous presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hails from the University of Pittsburgh, highly accomplished, running the show there with physical medicine and rehab, renowned in research in spinal cord injury and assistive technology. And thanks for joining us here today.
Happy to be here, I think.
You think, yeah? I'm gonna owe people some big stuff here. For our first topic, I asked Dr. Boninger to come and talk with us, share some opinions. He usually has a few. And we wanted to look at this topic of exoskeleton robotic technologies. Just to kind of lead into this, Dr. Boninger, some examples are the Exo from Exobionics. I wanted folks to have websites to look up more information. The Rewalk by Argo Technologies, and the Indigo is up and coming with Parker Hannafin. And we're talking about, we've got folks who typically use wheelchairs. These devices were designed for people who otherwise don't have the ability to walk. And, based on what we're seeing, there's a lot of information out there, and I think that this population in the audience, really has some thoughts about that. So how about if we start by polling our audience with a question.
Sounds
and
good.
then we'll see where we can go from there.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yes.
Andy, let's go ahead and pull up our polling question number 1. For those of you who randomly have a clicker in the audience, we're going to go ahead and ask the first question, and then we're going to have Dr. Boninger kind of analyze where we are with this. So the first question: robotic exoskeleton technologies allow wheelers to walk. Based on the media coverage, the published evidence, and what you know, about what time is it for robotic exoskeletons? Dr. Boninger, would you please read our choices?
Sure. A, ready for prime time. B, almost time. C, needs more time. And D, waste of time.
So those of you with the clickers in the audience, please think about that. Enter your response. We'll keep the polls going. We're up there. We've got over 100 respondents so far. Isn't this cool? This little audience thing. I'm going to walk around with my children. What do you think about this? Yes, no. Okay. Andy, we can close the polls and take a look at our results. Okay. All right.
So it looks like we have a clear-cut winner and needs more time.
Yep. So go ahead, tell us, Dr. Boninger, with looking at the results, is it surprising? Is it what you expected? And tell us some of your thoughts about the robotic exoskeletons and how they fit with our population of wheeled mobility users.
So that's a broad question. I would put myself pretty solidly in the blue category. So I would agree with the vast majority of the audience. And I'm actually surprised that we had 15% in here who say ready for prime time. What I love about robotic exoskeletal walkers, not dissimilar from my presentation yesterday, is that I think that they offer hope, and I think the technology is cool. When I talk to my son, he talks about Iron Man, and he wants to build an exoskeleton, right? They see that movie, that's what the engineers want to do out there, and I think that having a bunch of young people, which is, I think, part of what is driving this. It's not necessarily the consumer saying, I want an exoskeleton. It's people saying, why can't we build an exoskeleton for someone with a spinal cord injury? And so I think the research is great, and I think it can hold great hope for the future. But I worry that research, especially in rehab and especially in the US, becomes a marketing tool. So many of the rehab centers across the country are marketing that they're the first to do exoskeletons, and so there's hype, and my concern is that the hype greatly exceeds the current functionality that these exoskeletons provide. So ready for prime time? I don't think so. Almost time? It's going to take a little bit more. My music was walk the line, and I think if you're walking in a straight line on level floor, then maybe, and you have a close friend who's willing to walk with you, then maybe they're ready for prime time. But absent that, I like the needs more time.
Yep, fantastic. One of the key areas we've talked about kind of what is functional mobility. I think everybody in the room, one of the challenges that we struggle with is that power versus manual mobility. And in making some of those decisions, oftentimes we look at how well can a person propel a manual wheelchair in terms of how fast are they moving, and making a decision as to whether power may be more appropriate for them based on their ability to move from point A to point B in a reasonable amount of time. Just based on the current published evidence, and there's just really a little bit out there, how do some of those movement speeds compare with walking with the exoskeleton technologies as compared to what we know about walking speeds and wheeled speeds? What do you think about that?
So the research studies that are out there actually on the exoskeleton kind of tend to hide walking speed a little bit, remarkably. They don't put right up front there, here's our average walking speed. If you look at it though, it turns out that the average walking speed, or actually the fastest walking speed on a 6-meter walk test was, or 6-minute walk test, was somewhere less than 0.5 meters per second. When you start talking about functional mobility, the general definition is, will you get hit by a car if you start crossing the street? And it's, that little guy's white, and you start, at that speed, you're going to get run down. And I think that I've actually given talks before where someone says, well, you're using your definition of functional speed when you talk about walking with a walker. And I have to reject that argument. I think that functional speed is actually functional speed. If your friends are walking backwards or have decided to scoot on their bottoms so that they're not getting bored as they walk with you, then you're probably not walking at a functional speed. So again, in the not ready for prime time area, that's one of the problems.
Yeah, very helpful. You mentioned one of the limitations, he kind of slid in there, as long as you have somebody with you as you're wanting to use this device. So right now, even the ReWalk is one device that is cleared by the FDA for personal use, and one of the limitations is just that one of the requirements with that FDA clearance is that you must have a trained companion with you at all times of using the device. We're going to see improvements. I think there's a lot of great work going on as we move towards, needs more time and moving towards prime time. What do you think some of the benefits might be as this technology continues to develop? Do you think, we're in a room full of people that specialize in wheelchairs and seating, and we have a technology that's being designed for people to get up and move about and leave the wheelchair sitting behind. If I could have my last slide, I wanted to highlight one of the pictures, bring one of my last slides back. Do you think we're moving towards the time in our careers or shortly thereafter? Are we going to reach
Great
a point?
slide, by the way. Oh,
Yeah.
took it down.
What I wanted to point out up there was, just I'll loop back to it, but I just wanted to ask is, are we going to reach a point where the wheelchair will be the secondary mobility device? Are we moving towards people are going to become paralyzed and get up and walking? And where do you see the fit between exoskeleton walking, wheelchairs? In 2 years, 4 years, or 6 years from now, are we going to have the International Exoskeleton Conference instead of the ISS?
Does it have to be an instead?
No.
In 2, 4, 6 years, it's not going to get there. And I do have to say that I don't want to be misconstrued here in that if we stop investing in research in exoskeletons, then this technology will go away and there won't be that hope for the future. Do I think in 6 years there'll be an exoskeleton that's around that is at the level where someone will give up their wheelchair? Not in 6 years. Okay. Do I have a hope that that might happen in the future? I think so. I think that when we get to this future where the exoskeleton is that transparent, at the same time we're going to be in this future where the wheel is transparent. We all know the Segway is this new device that gave people who have legs that are fully functional the option to wheel around. And I think that what you're going to start seeing in the future will be if exoskeletons are that great, I'll buy one so that I can not have to think while I'm walking maybe. And so I think it's a long time before we'll be replaced, but will there be an exoskeletal conference, an international exoskeletal conference in 6 years? Maybe. I don't think many of the people in the room will be there, but there'll be a whole other group, and hopefully they'll do great work.
Great, fantastic. I brought up this slide, I just wanted to highlight, just the attention. The reason we wanted to bring this forward is I think all of you are seeing this technology in the news. It is exciting. It is, it's an outstanding innovation. I just want to highlight the picture on the top left. If you can't see it, it's a little bit small. Is President Obama and Benjamin Netanyahu walking with an individual in her ReWalk system? And it's just the media coverage, the political attention, and people who don't work in our industry see this technology, and I hear quotes like, "This is the greatest thing that has ever happened, for people with disabilities." And I think, most of us in the room can agree that the greatest thing that's ever happened for people with disabilities is the wheelchair and all of the people that take care of folks who need wheelchairs. So I just encourage you, as we're moving through the program is, be an advocate, and we embrace the technology, we embrace the innovation, but it's also an opportunity to provide that compare and contrast and make sure that we're meeting all of the needs of people, who have mobility impairment. So fantastic.
Yeah, I think, again, that one of the problems that wheelchairs face, and you heard Rory talk about this yesterday, is there's not a rehab engineering research center on wheelchairs anymore. Right. And for some reason, the sex appeal of brain-computer interface work, like I talked about yesterday, it's not for some reason, it's for obvious reasons. The sex appeal of those devices garners research funding, it garners political support, and we're doing a horrible job in the wheelchair industry, or maybe we're fighting a losing battle at getting that same type of attention. And I do want to say that, I don't think that I should be making the value judgment about what's important to a wheelchair user. Being at eye level with someone, being on that equal ground is hugely important. What I've seen is this migration when people talk about the ReWalk or other devices, is they start, because it's not that great at walking, you can't go upstairs, uneven terrain is a problem, they start talking about the physiologic benefits, like pulmonary function and bowel and bladder, but you could get that from exercising in different ways, and that doesn't come up in the conversation all that often.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. We do see that quoted in the literature. The limited literature that's out there is we don't know a whole lot about the mobility, but it really helps bowel and bladder and respiratory and all these other things. And I think, as Dr. Boninger is saying, that kind of remains to be seen, the role of exoskeletons in that. So thank you. Fantastic. Good to see you.
You're welcome.
All right. It's time to introduce our next celebrity guest. Celebrity guest number 2 is getting ready. Wait. Come on up. Dr. Stephen Sprigle. Thank you for coming, Steve. How you feeling?
Okay.
Good. Fantastic. Thank you for coming. Have a seat. We take a risk when we do things a little bit differently, and you guys all know, anyone that knows these personalities, they were hand-selected for coming up to stage and going along with Kendra's little game here. But I asked each of them to provide background information, and please send a picture of yourself for the slide. And so this is what I get from Sprigle, straight from 2012.
Yeah.
Replica of his 3rd grade photograph.
I hate sitting for photos, and but I think they did a good job with the makeup on this one.
Yeah, they did.
I thought it was pretty impressive.
Yeah. So thanks for coming all the way from Atlanta. How are you feeling these days?
Yeah. So I do feel the need. I got to sort of come full disclosure. So unfortunately, I have this giant lesion on my forehead that's a little distracting.
Can we zoom in on that? No, it's okay.
Yeah, and I want to give another option in case this is too distracting. That maybe we could. It's your call entirely.
It's it really does distract
one.
from the big lesion on your forehead from your illness.
But other than that,
he's doing well.
I'm a little tipsy, but other than that.
Thanks for being here. Okay, to launch into our next topic of discussion, we're going to jump right in and start with a polling question. So if we can pull up audience poll number 2, Dr. Sprigle has a question for all of you. All right, so let's take a look at that. You only have 5 choices. You cannot choose all of the above. Which of the following seating and positioning issues is most problematic for you? Steve, would you mind reading our options?
The first is managing spasticity, followed by pressure ulcer prevention, and then pain, postural stability, and then function from the seated position.
So you have 5 choices. You cannot choose all of the above. Which one is most challenging for you in your practice in wheeled mobility and seating? You guys are good. They all come rolling in. I am going to poll my children. What would you like for breakfast today?
How many choices would there be?
Really? Cereal?
Like
Cereal or toast?
Or hunger?
All right, Andy, we can close the poll and take a look. Okay. All right. Steve, I'll let you use your expert skills in analytics to evaluate and comment.
Okay, so this is kind of an interesting question, of course, because there's certainly no right or wrong answer. It's very individualistic. It reflects sort of your client mix, right? It reflects your inherent expertise. It reflects stuff, you tend to be more comfortable with things you see a lot maybe and less comfortable with other things. But what you see, right away is a fairly equal distribution, right? Nothing rises above, and so I would view them as sort of equally important, and I would hope that it was a quandary for the group. But that's why we use the word most and not, choose all the above. What did you think about it?
I was kind of hoping to see something like that. I mean, it's hard to say as we think about what do we want to know from the audience. I mean, it was really fun preparing for this because we've had a lot of lively discussions on the phone getting ready. And Steve and I talked about this as, we could ask a number of different questions where we already know the answer. And we really wanted to get an idea of what do people struggle with? Because everybody struggles probably with all of these areas some of the time. But it's good to see kind of that distribution. And it's about what I think we expected to see was kind of that challenge. Steve, one of the things we've talked about is in highlighting all of the things that you do. So Steve is a physical therapist, PhD, professor, researcher, and really has spent a lot of time coordinating research studies and publishing extensively on topics related to wheeled mobility and seating, from how people use their wheelchairs, what's going on at the skin-cushion interface. Tell us a little bit about some of your current work, and if we could emphasize why. Why are you a researcher? Why not just be a PT and see these folks in the clinic? What is valuable about the research, and what should the audience really be attending to as they're reviewing the published literature and attempting to apply that to their practice?
Yeah, that's more than a 12-minute question.
And he only has 12 minutes to talk, so.
And so I think awkward silence is appropriate here. Well, let's take a look at these things, right, relative to research. And one of the things that will jump out at you is how commingled they are. And that's the death of research, right, when you have a lot of variables that are commingled. And so, I'd like to ask you, right, so how many of these things do you manage pharmacologically versus in sort of the traditional seating and mobility stuff?
Well, because they're commingled, you could argue all four of them,
Yeah.
Okay.
right? So the spasticity would impact all of the last 3, 4, and 5 probably, as would pain. And so I think you could argue for pharmacological management of all of them. Unfortunately, not the best tool that we have.
Yeah, and in terms of research, it's a confounder, right? So if you're going to study seating and positioning relative to spasticity, you sort of have to know what meds they're on.
Right, exactly.
And then there's compliance to meds. And if those things fall apart, whatever intervention you do falls apart. And then you get into other kinds of medications. I remember I was reviewing a study in class, and the description of the inclusion criteria, they were wheelchair users, and it said the cohort was elderly wheelchair users who were not on medication. And so I looked at my students and I said, well, right there, we're done. Because
Did they pass? You're done? You
whoever
pass,
they
or-
recruited were the only 15 people on the planet that met that criteria. Because that's what makes some of what we do so difficult, is because just in terms of managing spasticity, or look at pain, right? Pain is an ever-present thing. And you could almost argue pain is a metric for overall health. And I have a colleague at Duke, Helen Honig, who advocates for, that's the only question we should ask. You go into the doctor and you say, are you in pain?
Yeah.
And that's it. And then you go from there. And I think she's right. And from seating and mobility, people get pain from sitting, for example, in a chair that doesn't fit you. Not to point any fingers or anything.
I think my legs are longer than Mike's.
Oh yeah, go there. Real nice.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
Yeah. Any static posture, will present with pain, and so we're faced with trying to study and inform interventions. What drives me crazy about like that example of research is it's not going to help you out. There are no older wheelchair users who are not on medications, and so I think in terms of these kind of things, we fight a battle in research in what's between internal validity and external validity. And we've let the internal validity people win. And that hurts the practitioners because then we can't apply it to everyday life. You can't it can't resonate and say, that's what I gotta try, because we've recruited and we've managed in such a narrow way in order to try to follow a more pathophysiology type of approach to research. Whereas what we do here is all rooted in function. You could argue, right? Function, rose to the top, but we put that in, as Kendra knows, because we wanted to complicate it a little bit, because, I'm a college professor, and hazing students is really the only fun I can have.
Well, and at first, I asked for multiple choice questions, and Sprigle comes in with, well, okay, first of all, if you notice, it does say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because I did transfer that and didn't.
Thank you.
But he sends over like A, B, C, D, E, F. And I'm like, really? Like 6 options? Who does that? And I did type back, who does that? I hope you don't do that to your students.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, he does. He said, yes, I do. Like to make it complicated.
Yeah. But so, look over this, okay? So let's start thinking about your patients, right? And you want to sort of design a study to figure out the best way to manage spasticity via some kind of seating and mobility device, okay? You're investigating a new dynamic seating device, and you're going to say, okay, this is going to help me manage spasticity because it's going to react to sort of movement and manage it. And to go through that, right, you're going to have to deal with all the other issues related there, right? You're never going to prescribe something that somehow induces pain or exposes the skin to some kind of damage. You're not going to give something that now suddenly somebody has to use these things as a brace to sit up. And of course, you're going to want to test it in terms of what they can do from the seating system which you gave them. Okay, so just this little simple thing, we've now complicated the study to a way that we can't control all those variables. Even worse is nearly everybody y'all work with actually goes home or goes outside a facility. You know how hard that is to manage somebody's life? I mean, parents out there, do you have any chance of limiting iPhone time? No, you don't. Well, now as a researcher, we have to deal with dosage, right? Well, how much are you wearing the exoskeleton? If you don't wear it very much, it can't affect, bowel and bladder. That's the same with this stuff. And that's what makes it so hard. So the best thing y'all can do, I think, is what Mike just said, and advocate for research that is clinically relevant. And commit your time to sit on grant reviews and pound the table and say, we need something that somebody can use in the next 5 years, not only stuff that is either funded by, is more medicine, but has to have that rehab-y look to it. It's hard, but if it was hard, somebody would have already done it. And this is the group that's got to do it.
No, I'm glad that you brought that up. Something we hear all the time is clinicians say, gosh, the researchers are often studying stuff that doesn't really matter for what we're doing in the clinics. And then a lot of the researchers will come and say, I really want to collaborate with clinical providers and technicians in the field that know this stuff so that we can study the right things. And so I think it's just an opportunity to highlight those collaborations are available. If you want information about something, connect up with some research teams at the universities. We've got a lot of different resources, and ask for studies to be coordinated that are meaningful to your work and also offer your expertise of what you're encountering in the clinic that you need more evidence to support or to understand, and I think it's really helpful. And to kind of wrap up this section, I know it's a loaded topic and we just have a minute or two, but Steve, you're very dedicated to studying things that matter, and one of the areas that you've really kind of moved forward in is using that evidence to have an impact on public policy. So when it comes to, well, gee, we can't get something funded, or getting the attention that we need for the important work that we do. Do you just have a brief comment or two of what is the role of clinical research applied to influencing public policy?
Yeah. Time's up, man.
Yeah, it's a big question. It's a big question, yeah.
I mean, I'll cover this a little bit this afternoon.
Yeah.
The seating and mobility world has failed in impacting public policy, and there's no two ways about it. And in my personal opinion, I think part of it is we've never, and this gets back to the first segment, we've never made the argument of, overcoming stigma. And in wheeled mobility, there's a stigma associated with it, and a stigma associated with the people who use it. And half the time they're viewed as slackers, right? And the other half the time they're viewed as accepting something, less optimal.
Right.
And that's not the case. If we change the discussion into wheelchairs as a liberating device, something that allows more activity, you can do more stuff. And this is inherent to the policy,
Right.
because policy is driven by sometimes the ground up. And we get funding for stuff that fits a very, very small group, yet a huge number of wheelchair users still open their wallet to buy their wheelchair.
Yeah.
And this is 2015 in the United States. That ain't right.
Excellent points, thank you. Fantastic. With any good talk show, we always talk about what's the next gig, the next movie, the next book. Steve, what do we have going this afternoon at 1:30?
Yeah, so it's always good to end a lunch event and segue into a discussion that includes physics. That's all I'm going to say.
So if you'd like to hear more from Dr. Sprigle and his entertaining ways this afternoon at 1:30, please take a look.
It's siesta.
I know.
That's
I
what
didn't get to plug my talk.
Just moving through, okay, just so you know, this is a very informal, I was prepared. I just got a little distracted in my debut this morning with the morning show. So this afternoon, Dr. Boninger, what do we have going at 3 o'clock?
No physics will be involved whatsoever. It's more of a discussion about not necessarily exoskeletons, but some of the arguments for wheelchair research, all based on studies done in the lab.
Fantastic.
A little bit of a rant.
Fantastic. Yeah, a little bit of a rant. Always guaranteed. All right. So we got through. I'm just moving through. Oops, there she is. Okay, and it's time. Thank you, Steve. Fantastic, as always. Appreciate it. It's time to introduce our third and
Make the
final
coffee mover.
celebrity guest. Let's cue up the music. Please welcome the lovely Mrs. Sharon Sutherland. You can do a little Irish step dance if you'd like.
Very nice.
Fantastic. She's so thrilled to do this for me. Thank you. Welcome, Sharon.
It's my
You look
pleasure.
lovely. You look lovely. How are the girls?
Fantastic.
Doing great. And
Yes, and I'm just glad that I got to wear a very puffy dress today and some boots, since I'm, among such esteemed
People wearing
gentlemen,
jeans.
and I'm just me, the
Yeah.
therapist.
Mark,
so it's my
I think
pleasure.
Mark told her.
told me.
She said, "What should I wear?" And he said, "A cute skirt and heels."
So
And
I
she
did my
did.
best.
And
Yeah.
she did. So fantastic. Thank you for
Yes.
joining us.
You're very
We can't move forward. I understand today is a special day for you. Can you
Yes.
please tell us about that?
Well, most of you who know me in this room know me as Sharon Pratt. And this day, 2 years ago, I got engaged. And now I'm Sharon Sutherland. So there you have it. Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever met someone that was just so happy to meet the love of her life. And he
Absolutely.
arrives today.
Yes.
Scott is rolling in today, so I want everybody in the room to accost him and let him know how fabulous his wonderful wife is, which I'm sure he knows.
He knew I was very nervous to do this, so he tried to be here for this morning, but there's a big snowstorm in Colorado, so he's getting in at noon today instead.
A little bit late, yeah.
So, it's
Yeah,
my
Sharon
absolute
said
pleasure.
she was a little bit nervous to come up here and ad lib, and if you look at her bio up on the screen, this woman has delivered over 800 presentations around the world. I got to write this up a little bit, so I'd like to focus on, clinical educator extraordinaire. Absolutely. How many in the room have attended a course delivered by Sharon Pratt?
Oh my God.
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness me.
And did she make a difference in what you do? Do you deliver better care to your clients? Absolutely. I also had to throw in there international phenomenon. This is really fun to put this stuff together. She is an international phenomenon. And,
Thank you. And I have to tell you, the very first time I ever met Kendra was probably about 20 years ago. And I was doing a
dating.
seminar in Seattle. And she walks up to me, this vibrant, wonderful young lady, and she said she was working, in the VA. She's now a very esteemed high up there. And but she walked up to me and she goes, "Oh my God, someday I want to be you." And now look at her. She's like way up there. It's
no, we have a
amazing.
great
That's how
time.
I met Kendra. Yeah,
That's right.
Really incredible.
Yeah, it was my first seating course, and I thought,
Yeah.
wow, this is really cool stuff. I got to figure out a way to do this. So it's been fun, and it's been fun to be in the same area. So Sharon, you travel the world. You travel the
Yes.
world and different languages, work with different people in different environments. And
I only have one language, and people tell me it's not even English.
I think it's sign
Because
hand.
I'm from Ireland.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but yes,
Absolutely.
you're correct.
Yeah. So we decided to go ahead and poll the audience, and we wanted to, Sharon's going to share some of her insight, but before we do that, we wanted to get a sense from our international audience. We'll go ahead and go to the third poll of how you kind of do things. Sharon's a specialist in the assessment of individuals who use wheeled mobility devices. And so the question is, and I want you to think about it, how often, with all of the patients that you see who use wheeled mobility devices, how often do you perform a comprehensive assessment, including moving the client out of an existing wheeled mobility device? So a comprehensive assessment, including getting them out of what they're currently sitting in. How often do you do that? Would you mind reading our options?
I'd be delighted to. So A is you always get the client out of their existing equipment to do a full mobility evaluation. B, you never do this. C, well, when there are known or visible challenges, for example, skin issues, postural issues, or functional issues. D, when I have time, because sometimes, we're in a very time-entrapped environment, so sometimes when I have time, or if I have extra help available, I get the client out of their chair to do a full evaluation. Or you're sitting there wondering, what are you talking about? What is a comprehensive seating assessment?
Yeah. And we want you to be honest. We want you to be honest.
It's not-
in
there's
your
no pass
everyday
fail.
practice. We can go ahead and open the poll. It's coming up. In your everyday practice, how often do you do this? Including getting folks out of the chair. The numbers are coming in. I love this response system. All right, it's still coming in. We've still got people thinking. And again, we want you to be honest, but folks are kind of going, how often do I really do this, or when do I do this? It's a good question. Okay, Andy, we can close the polls. Okay. So it looks like we have 57% said that they always perform the assessment, including getting the client out of the chair. 4% said never. 28% when there's a known or visible problem. 9% said when I have time or there's extra help available. And 2% of you said, what is that? And that's perfectly acceptable. That's why we provided it as an option. So Sharon, what do you think of these results, and what comments do you have?
Well, I think back to 28 years ago when I first found myself doing a wheelchair seating evaluation totally unexpectedly. And I remember looking at this young gentleman in a clinic, and I came from Ireland to Toronto, and I was in Toronto, my first port of entry into North America, and this young gentleman rolled in a wheelchair, and he needed an evaluation for setting up his wheelchair for optimal performance. Now, let me remind you, those of you who remember back then, we had, 16 by 16 inch E&J wheelchairs, manual, or 18 by 16, and everybody fitted into them. So the adjustments were limited. But nonetheless, I knew nothing. And so if I had taken this poll 28 years ago, I would have said, well, I'm doing a wheelchair evaluation. Why would I take the person out of the wheelchair to do a wheelchair evaluation? I would have looked at them in the wheelchair and thought, well, we'll do this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
So I would have said, probably, if there was something really visible, like you're falling out of it, I might take you out of it. That was back then. And then, I met many influential people in my life, and I would have said, maybe when I have extra time or help. And now, 28 years later, I would say that unless the person totally rebelled and was totally, absolutely against me getting them out of the wheelchair, I would say I would vote A, always. And the reason is because the time that it saves, even though it takes extra time up front, at the end result is your outcomes are so much better. If I had 5 minutes in the experience of a mat evaluation in supine, never mind sitting, but just in supine, if I had 5 minutes, I would spend that 5 minutes evaluating the relationship between the thigh and the pelvis. Because in my humble opinion, and truly, there's so many incredibly experienced people in this audience, and I admire each and every one of you because I've learned so much from all of you. And I'm looking at you all, and I'm thinking, I've learned so much from you all. But the one thing that I've learned is that the majority of the humans that I touch, thousands, do not have the hip flexion to sit in the wheelchairs we put them in. So in other words, I believe that for the majority of our lives as clinicians, we're making the person fit to the chair as opposed to making the seating system and the chair fit to the person. And if I had 5 minutes, I would spend it putting my hand behind the pelvis and checking the range of hip flexion relative to pelvic, thoracic, lumbar spine mobility. Because I believe that scoliotic postures are happening in our children because of hip limitations. So I would do 5 minutes for a hip flexion evaluation relative to the pelvis if I had a choice. That was a long answer to a short question.
Perfect.
That's my style.
She was like, I don't know if I can answer these questions on stage. I'm like, really? Really, Sharon? She did a fantastic job. So if you have 5 minutes, what we took from that is we talk a lot about, do we always have to get out a goniometer and measure every single angle of every single joint? There are occasions where we need some exact measures, but Sharon was really highlighting that when she's really focusing on what's a key issue, she never bypasses looking at the angular relationship between the femur and the pelvis. And so really want that to highlight that as a takeaway point. What if you have some more time? What if you really, as you're traveling the world, she just got back. I couldn't talk to her in the last couple of weeks to prepare because she was literally, I'm traveling the world and then I'll be back for ISS. When you have some more time, what do you encounter that no matter what country, no matter what types of patients we're seeing, pediatrics, geriatrics, what are some other key areas that you have found to be beneficial and that you would encourage all individuals working in wheeled mobility to really take a look at our seated individuals?
Well, I can say that in the last, let's say 15 months, I've been everywhere from China to Latin America, which I can't wait to go back to. Those of you out there from Latin America, raise your hands. Come on. Anybody from Latin America? No? Where are you today?
There's a couple
oh, yeah. I can't wait to go back.
But,
So from Latin America, China, Western Europe, everywhere that I've been, the number one, I do a poll. I teach people the mistakes I've made. I don't have anything to offer anybody except the mistakes that I've made. And I hope always that you'll never make those same mistakes. And when I poll every audience that I ever sit in front of, and it's a privilege for me because I learn from every audience, and I ask everybody at the end of the day, so what's the number one takeaway you've received from this event today? And it's always hands-on that I do. It's not theory, it's very minimal theory and all hands-on.
She'll say, put your hands on this.
Yes. And
Love your neighbor.
if you don't like your neighbor, you know, put it on your other neighbor. And then we bring in actual clients from the community in every seminar that I teach. And my number one question is, what did you get from this? And every audience, worldwide, regardless of language spoken, size, dimension, diagnostic group, it doesn't matter. Every audience tells me that the number one thing to take away from all the trainings that I do is the value of the hands-on evaluation. Therapists look at me and they go, you know, I knew this was important, but my goodness, I can't wait till Monday morning till I go and see the next client and get my hands on them because I'm so excited. That rocks my world.
That was me. That was me.
That
20
rocks my
years ago.
world. It really, truly does. So it's the passion for wanting to get out there and do the next hands-on evaluation because it just reminds therapists what you all know already, but we just have to do it. And sometimes we're afraid of what we don't know because we're not taught this in our undergraduate programs. And that's what I'd like to mention before I leave this lovely, long depth, inappropriate for address chair today. Just saying, yes. And thank you to the University of Pittsburgh team for reminding me, Sharon, this chair is not appropriate for your dress. I'm good with that. Yeah. Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes.
No, I think she's covered some really great topics. I had something and then she started talking about her dress and I lost my train of thought.
So
Yeah.
just this week, I just want to mention to you that the World Health Organization and hold on, I brought my smartphone, which is much smarter than I have to just remember the acronym because I'm not good at acronyms. The ISWP. That would be the International Society of Wheelchair Professionals. So I sat through a wonderful presentation yesterday, and I've talked with different colleagues over the last year, and I think that it's so exciting for me to think that on a worldwide basis, people are now actually doing something on a level that brings us all speaking the same language. So whether it's the Guide to Wheelchair Seating Measures that Kelly Waugh and Barbara Crane have put together that I'm committed to and I do every day, learning a new language to put that into place so we all speak the same language. Whether it's that or whether it's this wonderful organization that are totally committed to everybody out there having a basic level of knowledge that says, look, there's no excuses anymore. There are absolutely no excuses. There's documentation online that you can pull up, that you can go out and you can do basic level education, you can do intermediate level education, you can even do a trainer level of education. So today, you know, when we do a poll at the beginning of every seminar, and we say, so what did you learn in your undergraduate program? The general answer is nothing. We might have got 5 hours, maybe 10 hours, but minimal.
Is that similar around the world?
Around the world,
Okay.
all over the world. Okay. And now what's really beautiful is, as a global exercise, there's a basic level of knowledge, and even beyond basic, so there's no excuses anymore. And one of the things that really bothers me the most is, we're healthcare professionals, and we have a license. And when I hear a therapist say to me, you know, no, I don't do that. I rely on the dealer to do that. And I have so much respect for dealers, so much, because I learned so much from dealers in my career. However, my professional license is who I am. I'm Sharon Pratt, now Sharon Sutherland, but my professional license is truly who I am. If I sign my name on something, then by golly, I better have done the work. So I suggest that we all take it upon ourselves to make a commitment that says, I will do the work. Now we have no excuses. We've got the World Health Organization, we've got this committee globally, and we've got a ground roots, we've got incredible educators in this audience, in this event, and there's no excuses anymore. So we have to put it down, get the client out of the chair, do the hands-on evaluation, and stop making excuses. And I mean that with passion. I mean it with commitment. And I'm here to help you all, and everybody in this room who's got all this experience is here to help you all, and that's truly all I have to bring to this table.
You are an international phenomenon. You are fantastic.
That's it, in a nutshell.
In terms of, we'll go to the next slide in terms of Sharon's next gig. Sharon actually did a half day, let's go back one, there we go. Sharon did a half day pre-conference here at the International Seating Symposium that was absolutely fantastic. She is not presenting again this particular conference. I just wanted to highlight, this is her website. She is a consultant. She sees clients, she provides clinical education. She is as good as it gets. So take a look at her offerings. We also wanted to highlight just additional resources when it comes down to, we consider it basic information, like this is basic stuff, and she really put the charge out to all of you. We gotta be doing this basic stuff, but there's a lot of questions about where are my resources? How can I learn more about this? I'm not sure if I really understand that femur to pelvis relationship. And we just wanted to highlight some more resources because this information is available, your colleagues are available, and we really want to set the standard at a high standard of getting this work done. So the International Seating Symposium, Workshops and Presentations is a fabulous resource. As Mark highlighted on day number 1, which feels like about 2 weeks ago to me anyway, a number of our presentations will be posted on the International Seating Symposium RSTCE website. And all of you who are registered for the ISS can access all of the RSTCE online webinars for free for the next year, next 12 months. If you want CEUs, there's a nominal fee that goes along with that just to cover that administrative expense. But please take advantage of the resources that are available to you to educate yourself and learn more. Manufacturers, many of our manufacturers offer phenomenal education. That was where Sharon worked for a couple of decades of working for manufacturers and providing that objective education and training to understand concepts in seating and wheeled mobility. It's really important that those courses are IACID approved, which provides evidence of objectivity. So it's not just a lunchtime in-service. There's a value to a lunchtime in-service to learn about the technology, but we really want to have evidence-based, objective information to help all of us understand this critical information. And then, there's others. There's many others in this room. I would be remiss if I tried to provide a whole list, but there are some amazing people out there that are educators, that are consultants, that have the ability to travel to you, to have you come to different seminars. And please, think about some keywords of posture, seating assessment, posture and wheelchairs. And you will find quite a list of opportunities that are available for that. Before we shift gears and go into, we have an opportunity for questions from our live studio audience. So I want you to be thinking about what questions do you have for these experts sitting up here on the platform. So as you're thinking about those questions, I'd like to just ask each of you if you have any additional comments, any additional thoughts as folks are gathering. I knew Dr. Boninger would shift forward in his long seat and have something to say. Take it away, Mike.
There's just 2 thoughts that I have that related to the wheelchairs and funding. One is that part of the reason that I think that other technologies get advocated for is because the wheelchair users are excited about them. They want the exoskeleton. They're talking to their congressman. And I don't know how we do it, but if we're just another group that's trying to get our congressman to give us more money, which is how physicians are perceived, how manufacturers are perceived, we're not going to be as successful as if we can motivate our patients to understand this and have them be the ones who are really driving for that change. And then the last one is I think that in the U.S. there is an opportunity right now. The healthcare system is changing, and what's happening across the country is this accountable care or capitated system, and there's these metrics like keeping people out of the hospital for 30 days after admission. And if we can show as a community that great wheelchair seating helps people stay at home, the cost discussion is going to go away because we're talking about millions of dollars that is at risk for health systems. We have a real opportunity as a group to jump into this PCORI research and this capitated cost structure and show that what we do is of value, improve it in a way that doesn't require the physiology. It just, did it keep them at home? That's the metric. And that's what we're all about in some ways.
Fantastic. Steve, anything to add?
I'd like to give you props for this. It's pretty interesting. If I wasn't so paralyzed with fear, I probably would have enjoyed it. Yeah.
I do. I owe them all big time. I can't wait to hear this. Did I pick a great group of celebrity guests or what? You know, it is all very strategic, and you know, it's ad lib, and it's like, let's see what the audience says, and let's talk about that. And you know, the phenomenal presenters in the audience, we've all done it. You know, there's a lot of work that goes into preparing presentations and citing the evidence, and it's hard. It's hard to be up and just kind of be on the cuff and provide information, but it takes the expertise that these three individuals possess to just really be able to address key issues and get into the depth that we really need to discuss them. So I just want to thank each of you. Sharon, anything else that you would like to add before we go to audience questions? You guys are lining up for audience questions.
I don't think I have a thing in the world to add. I think I said it all.
Fantastic.
Can you believe that?
I knew she would. Sharon was my most nervous guest, and look at her. She is fantastic. You're done. You did a great
I like
job.
to be fully prepared. So
That's right.
in a situation like this, there's no preparation. It's like, whoa. So bring on your questions.
Okay, we have microphones in the audience. If you want to stand up right here, I'll try to repeat your question, but please, this is an opportunity to continue the discussion. We have about 12 minutes or so to go through some questions. Yes?
Yes, I would like to hear Dr. Boninger respond to what ended up being the highest of Dr. Sprigle's answers, the function.
Oh, can we?
Relationship between the exoskeleton and what you do once you get from point A to point B.
Okay, so you want Dr. Boninger to respond to Dr. Sprigle's results
Yes.
on the topic of?
Of that
Function.
answer. Function. What you do when you get there.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure I understand the question. I think that by the way, in the poll that Stephen had, I voted for function. I was one of those people. So I think it is all about function. I think that in relation to an exoskeleton, there is a great deal of function you can achieve while you're standing that might be difficult in a wheelchair. If we all had seat elevators in our wheelchair or standing chairs, that would change. If that's where you're driving, I'm all with you in that, you know, what we have to do is make our wheelchairs as functional as possible. You know, is that the goal or is exoskeletons the goal? And the answer should be both. That.
But I was also driving at what you only have so much energy,
You okay?
and what are you spending the energy?
Okay, so
All right, great.
she's asking
She
for
has
those
a
who
point.
couldn't hear.
See, there's one of those things where you just want to say,
Let's repeat
make
the
your
question.
point.
Well, let's repeat. She said, so basically, she was asking for those who couldn't hear. She said, you know, there's only so much time in the day. There's only so much energy. How do you focus that effort? And Dr. Boninger has more to say about that. And Dr. Sprigle is really sitting at the edge of the seat. Doesn't look like it, but he is.
Petrified.
He's the only one that has a femur length appropriate for the chairs.
I have to tell you that I love when someone in the audience has a point and a question and does it in a question. So the other question is, you know, if you spend all your energy moving from point A to point B, then what do you have left at the end of the day? And I will take that one step further. If you spend your life on the hope that you can walk from point A to point B, what else are you going to be doing? And there's a really wonderful study that was done by a medical student with me named Melissa Riggins that looks at that, and we'll be talking about that a little bit, but there's harm there. There's a potential for harm that I think we all have to recognize about this focus on walking.
Fantastic. Dr. Sprigle does have a few follow-up comments.
Yeah, so this to me this question resonated a lot with me because, you know, in sense how I interpret it is as these exoskeletons are a means of conveyance. And as a means of conveyance, you're segueing between an activity, you convey, you translate, and then you do another activity. And in some wheelchair users, that's how wheelchair users use wheelchairs, because the overwhelming majority of wheelchair users actually can stand up, they can walk. And so wheelchairs becomes a means of conveyance, and that's a big problem because they're not really valued as much as you can see. The trick, of course, is what you do when you get there. And now you look at wheelchairs as the functional base, that from which people do everything. And I've had this conversation. I've met 2 inventors of those things, those exoskeletons, and I asked the same question to them. I said, it seems to me 100% of your users are going to have to sit. How does your exoskeleton allow people to sit? And there's a guy in this audience, he's on this side, who's, I think, trying to crack that, to try to look at an exoskeleton that allows you to function in a seated position. Because the fact is, as adult humans, we do an extraordinarily high amount of stuff sitting. We're not all postmen walking around. And that's the trick, is that a wheelchair is not merely a means of conveyance. It's a functional extension of the user's being. And you're exactly right, and we can't forget that.
Excellent points, thank you. Do we have any other questions from the audience? The infamous Mr. Thomas Hetzel, what's your question? Dr. Hetzel, what do you have to say?
Quick observation. Dr. Boninger, are you aware that not having a wheelchair may be equally effective in keeping people at home 30 days after discharge?
So to repeat the question/statement from Mr. Hetzel, Dr. Boninger, are you aware that not providing a wheelchair will also keep somebody at home for longer than 30 days?
Well, so God, there's so many places to go with that one. Obviously, the wheelchair is only any good for use in the home, right? We know that wonderful rule. So
In America.
We're all good.
my apologies to my international colleagues on that one, but in the U.S., they have to be for use in the home. We're not leaving our home with our wheelchairs. And kidding aside, what happens is you go home. I think a phenomenon is you go home with this incredibly limited mobility. You don't get the wheelchair, so you sit at home, and medical complications arise. You obsess about by the way, aging parents is the way to really learn this stuff. And right now, I'm like, how many people, raise your hand if you've learned this from aging parents? It's the young people in the room that have not raised their hands. And that becomes the focus, and then you're laying in bed, you get a pain that you might have ignored if you were wheeling around a mall, and you go to the emergency department. You're on a couple of medications, interestingly enough, in your wheel. And so it's a great point, thank you.
Fantastic. All right, we have time for one last question, or I think Tom Hetzel gave us a statement. Mark Warner in the back will wrap it up. Please step to the mic, Mark.
Morning. So I was one of the 15% that voted for Ready for Prime Time, and I did that because I think that it's a consumer-driven product, and that if the consumers don't have the product, it's not going to be advanced to the point where it becomes functional. So I just want to present that point. And then the other question I have for the panel and for the group here is I've been getting more and more concerned about larger DME companies swallowing up smaller companies, and then innovation gets lost in the translation someplace because they're more interested in whether it's a marketable product rather than if it's a product that will increase function because of its innovation. I've just been concerned by the lack of innovation from some of the major companies because they're swallowing up the smaller companies, and then no R&D is being done. So are you as concerned as I am?
So, I got to stand up. I do most of my stuff in a standing position.
You did really good this whole time.
Yeah, I was there the whole time.
Good.
I can't agree with you more. There's a couple of caveats. So one is that this drive, there's two things that are driving the exoskeleton. Well, there's three things that are driving the exoskeleton. One is the patients, our consumers. They see this, like my son, they see Iron Man, and they want it. And so that's a very valid drive. The second one, I think, is people like my son who say, I want to build Iron Man. And they buy and they innovate in these small companies. And if you go through the exhibit hall, this innovation is there. And if we lose it, we're dead. And so we absolutely have to pay attention to that. The third one, and this is where the problem occurs, is the marketing of it. And so I think if you ask your average consumer whether they wanted an exoskeleton, they'd say absolutely. I've talked to a number of people who've gotten their exoskeletons, and you ask them what they're using it for 6 months later, and it's not a functional device for them. And so I think we just have, and we have to be careful that we're marketing it, that companies and clinicians are saying the right thing. This is what an exoskeleton has value in. Here's the limitations you're going to see. I mean, I can't help with the parallel with spinal cord injury cure research, where where in countries where IRB regulations are less, they don't need to have laboratory animals because people from the U.S. and other places pay to have these spinal cord injury cures that don't work. And so there's a parallel there that scares me quite a bit.
Right. Steve, do you have a final closing comment?
Was that question about small companies getting eaten up by larger companies?
Yes. And
Yeah.
do we lose innovation along the way?
Yeah, I've struggled with this. I'm old, and so I came up as Tom Hetzel, because he's old like me. We would make stuff. We would be in the clinic and we'd have to make stuff. Because nothing existed. You didn't have anything off the shelf. And that's how it was, sort of, even in the 80s. So you had to make stuff. And then you started seeing more and more stuff being available, and you can go to the exhibit hall, and there's tons of stuff, a huge continuum of things. And you're absolutely right that a lot of the innovation comes from small companies, but that's been going on forever. Michael Silverman started a company out of his dad's business in Chicago to do central fab of custom seating. And after a while, it got bought up. And then he went on, and now he's even a more successful small businessman in Chicago. He's just that good. And I think the bad thing is we lost him in rehab. The good thing is the IT world gained a good small business guy. But this has been going on a long time, and I don't think it will ever end. I think small companies, small innovative companies have the drive to focus on one thing. The big companies offer distribution and support. And a small company can't do that. I talk to inventors all the time because I used to run, it's funny you said there's no Wheel Mobility Rehab Engineering Center, and I unfortunately was the holder of the last one. It's probably not a good thing to say.
Yeah.
You did such a good job, we're just going to end it. But I talk to small companies all the time, and I always tell them, if you're really good at this, you're going to have to face that question of getting bought or not. But think about it. Your job is not to provide devices for people in Portland. Your job is to provide devices for people all over the country. And you have to remember, you have to answer that phone from New York City when your device doesn't work. And so think about that. But they all want to start in that innovative entrepreneurial way. And I think that's good. I think that's good for the industry, and we need to support them in some way to keep that going, and then let the bigger companies optimize distribution and support.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for coming. I again want to thank my special celebrity guests, Dr. Michael Boninger, Dr. Stephen Sprigle, and the lovely Mrs. Sharon Sutherland. Thank you very much. A lot of fun. Can we take it back? Good. Okay, the code for your CEU credit for this session is SS, as in special session, SS4731. 4731. We're going to hightail it off this stage. Your next set of sessions begin at 9:30. Look at your maps, look at your venues, get to your next sessions. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and please visit our exhibitors today before they pack up. Thank you very much.